That's one small step for brands, one giant leap for brandkind.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Food Chain presented by Perfy. Today we have Wade Yenny, the Vice President of Brand Management and Business Development at Vdriven Consulting, but we like to call him the Head of Relationships. Wade, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vasa. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a lot easier to just say one word instead of, I don't even know how many that is. I have to count it. But yeah, I like relationships.
Yes, relationships is a good thing. Relationship capital is something we've spoken on this podcast with Bruce Cardenas one time. He's like the dude that knows everybody. And moving forward, it'll be the relationships guy at Vdriven. But today, you're Wade to me.
I love it. I love it.
Wade, I want to jump into, I like going into the guest's background on this. Your background is pretty stellar in grocery. You went from Buehler's to Rouses to Jimbo's and then to the fresh market. And now you're over at Vdriven Consulting. Tell me how you got into grocery and how that evolved from brand to brand.
Sure. Yeah. So my background, born and raised in Ohio, grew up in the restaurant business, actually started working in restaurants in high school and eventually found my way, albeit it's a failed startup, right? I made the decision at an early, oh my gosh, I have to do the math here, 21-ish, 20-ish, that I could own and operate my own restaurant. I went from being a cook to a assistant manager and so on and so forth. Went on a limb, tried to do this thing, did it for a couple years. But the key is going back to the relationship piece. Before I decided to do that, I had interviewed with Buehler's in the restaurant capacity. So their grocery stores, they have full service restaurants. And I interviewed with them. They offered me a position as an assistant manager in their restaurants. And I wanted to be a manager. I didn't want to be assistant to the regional manager. I wanted to be a manager. And so I took this other job, had my own restaurant. But the key there is that relationship piece is the person that interviewed me and offered me a position. His name was Greg Buehler. And when my restaurant went south and I just was going to have to close up, he's the first person I called. And I called him and he offered me a job as a manager. And I went there, worked in the restaurants for a couple years, and then realized that if I wanted to do anything in this company, if I wanted to go beyond restaurants, I had to figure out the grocery business. And because they were grocery stores with restaurants, not restaurants with grocery stores. So I entered into a training program, spent the next year learning all aspects of operations, receiving, night crew, day crew, cashiering, you name it, I did it over that year. And traveled. I think at that time we had 11 stores and I hit 10 of the 11 in my training over that year. And then from there, I was placed in the highest volume grocery department, which was in our Wadsworth location, and became a salaried grocery manager overseeing all grocery, dairy, frozen, and beer and wine. And that was the start of it. So I'll pause there because I don't need this is a mutual conversation. I don't want to take up all. So we'll pause there. That's how I got started in grocery.
I find that people who have service industry experience have a very, very unique perspective as it pertains to service. Like I have an agency as well. We always call it bartending. When something goes wrong, we have to buy our clients a drink. And then also as it pertains to CPG, people that come from, we'll use bartending or serving as an example. It may be tough at times when you don't get tipped or whatever. There's always those nightmare service industry stories, more so on the serving side, less so on Waiting, the movie where people are doing crazy stuff in the back of house. We won't talk about that stuff. But I love when people have that experience. I was just on a phone call earlier with a gentleman who also had nightlife background before they got into marketing. And I feel like it just opens your eyes to a whole different angle of going about things.
Well, I think it definitely sets the stage for having thick skin, right? Because you're, and you're in the thick of it. And I think beyond that, the service culture, right? The customer's always the customer, the customer's always right. The customer's always, whatever you want to look at that frame. But then I think bigger for me, the relationship aspect is the people skills, right? Because whether you're dealing with, that busboy or the server, the hostess, the customer, you have this stew of people, right? With all these different dynamic personalities, and you have to manage them. And so to me, it just, relaying that from that role into the grocery manager role, which then I had stockers, right? I had a night stock, day stock, all these different people you're managing, and just, learning to develop people skills, and so whether starting when I was a teenager as a cook and I was the tyrant you're talking about in the kitchen, throwing things and doing stuff, or graduating into this manager overseeing all of that, you learn personality, and there isn't, well, first of all, I still have PTSD from restaurants. I can tell you nightmares about that. But beyond that, I think the people component, I often to this day either use analogies related to restaurant experience and the dynamics involved. And I think it applies to everyday life. Or I can say, I'm talking to you and say, oh yeah, he reminds me of so-and-so, because you work with so many dynamic people, and it just has really helped expand my people skills immensely.
100%. I think there's managing vendors. You do a lot of that in CPG. I remember when I worked in a bar, it was a restaurant in the daytime from 9 a.m. on the weekends till 2 a.m. close in California. That's as long as you can go at the time. I think it's still 2 a.m. And doing deliveries, doing the ordering, like making sure the deliveries come in at nice. I had a friend who sadly he passed away, one of my best friends who passed away. He was so good at receiving the food and making sure like it wasn't a penny over for the pounds of lettuce. Like there's so much you have to do and such an attention to detail that when you go from, people always talk about like QSR to CPG, like how QSR brands are creating CPG sauces and stuff. But I think that on the backside of things, the people that were in QSR or restaurant service industry in general that go to CPG, whether as a worker or a founder, I think, in my opinion, a greater advantage in a way.
I can totally see why that would be the case. I don't know if it absolutely helped frame who I am, and certainly, like I said, the thick skin aspect of it, it's untouchable from that experience. But I can see how the ups, the downs, the ebbs and flows, and all the things that you deal with in the QSR restaurant side of things. There are so many parallel streams in CPG that it makes perfect sense why that would be the case.
I have a funny story that before we go to how you went to Rouses, I always try to tell this story. I learned probably the greatest lesson in my life when I moved up very quickly in the nightlife industry. And we worked in a bar that created Mexican food. And like palapas and fake candles. Obviously, having live candles is a fire hazard. But there was this candle story that I always talk about. It's behind the salsa bar. Salsa always has to have ice under it. If the ice is melted, you're screwed. And my candle ran out of battery at the very wrong time one night. And this is like right when you get your schedule at the restaurant, like the higher you are in your section, like that tells you like your seniority, but not your seniority, but like where you're at in the roster. And I was at the top of the roster, and that candle went out when the owner and the regional manager who oversaw all of the stores came in. I was like, fuck, dude, like, what are the chances? And we were taught like, it's just, you don't create any excuses. You just own it, you eat it. And that to me, more so than tough customers, is what gave me the thickest skin. I prefer when I'm working for clients or when I used to work for companies, having hard bosses, those that were like absolutely taking it out on you. I'm just used to that. That's just how I'm wired. But that's one story where the attention to detail and like not forgetting something as simple as a freaking candle's battery has shaped my career, in my opinion.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
So how'd you go from Buehler's to Rouses, and what was that like at Rouses?
Yeah. So Buehler's, I mentioned being a grocery manager. I eventually applied for and received promotion to the office as the buyer. Was a grocery dairy frozen buyer. Eventually got promoted to director. Eventually got promoted to senior director. And at that point, I was reporting to our CEO. And it pretty much got into the place where I felt there wasn't much more I could do there. Right. I was reporting to CEO, senior director. Titles are titles. As we already said, I've got this 10 words in my title. And I think, I jokingly say this now, and I think I can because I still have strong relationships there and can refer to these people. But I joke and I say, well, if I was going to go any further, I probably would have had to marry the CEO's daughter. Number one, I don't know that he had a daughter. Number two, I don't think my wife would have liked that too much. So, and it was at that point, about that same time, we'd always said we were going to kind of stay put until the kids were kind of through college and at a point where, we weren't going to upset their, academics or, home life, moving around. So a friend that I'd worked with at Buehler's, not at Buehler's, but he worked for our supplier at the time, which was Spartan Nash out of Grand Rapids, had moved to Louisiana and taken a job with Rouses. And he and I are close friends, still are to this day. And he reached out to me about this opportunity, coincided with our daughter finishing up school. And it was like, we were empty nesters. It was time. And so I moved down there. That would have been January 2019. Took a step back, at that time, I think when I left, we had 14 stores. Rouses, I think, had 63-ish when I got there, and went from senior director, again, here comes this title thing, senior director to category manager, which is a couple notches down in title. but I oversaw for that time what we called meals. So dinner, pasta sauces, spaghetti, pastas, all that stuff, breakfast, cereals, all that stuff, rice, side dishes, anything around the meals category and dry grocery is what I did. And that only lasted for about 4 months before I was promoted to director over non-foods, general merchandise, and health and beauty, candy, confection. So kind of went the other direction pretty quickly in that promotion. But yeah, that's how I ended up in Louisiana.
When you're a category manager or buyer or anything where you're analyzing products and brands to bring them on shelf, what are some of the things that you look for that are most important, particularly in food and beverage, before you went to the other category?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because different places do things in different ways, right? From a standpoint of what their motivations are. Do we want to be first to market? And in a lot of cases, Rouses is a top notch. I have so much respect for them. It's like Buehler's turned up to 15, But as far as if our senior leadership team saw products in competition and we didn't have it on our shelves, you better have a reason why you didn't have it on the shelf. They wanted to be first to market. And the same thing for price parity. If you weren't within the realm of pricing, you better have a reason for it, or you better be able to explain what the story was. And I think, that to me, the competitive nature of that, it factored into the decision making a lot, right? I knew I had to be at the top of my game. I knew if so-and-so came in with a product, regardless of in that environment, regardless of data or what have you, I knew I had to have it in the store because I was going to be told if I didn't have it in the store to bring it in. So it's better to be ahead of it.
Yeah.
And so, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but fast forward to Jimbo's, which I know we're going to talk about, but that was a little bit different, right? There we have a list of standards that I have to adhere to. And so this might be the hottest product in the market and setting the world on fire at Erewhon and Bristol Farms and all these perceived competitors around, but if it didn't meet my standards, I couldn't bring it in. So that decision-making process was a lot different as well. So, and then going backwards to Buehler's, what I did there was a lot different. I had to do a lot of optimization because if I left it up to General Mills of the world, I would have 15 different sizes of Cheerios. I'd have an 8 ounce, 10 ounce, 12 ounce, 14 and 18, of yellow box Cheerios. And so there's some optimization that had to be taken in. So different stops, different places. I don't know if I answered the question, but different factors of consideration, along the way at each stop. But I don't know. I'm anxious to hear what your thoughts are with that answer, because I can expand or go somewhere else.
I love it. I love it. I think that in my experience as a marketing agency owner and a founder, more on the founder side, what I see is my perspective is that there are category reviews and there are brands, whether it's where they are in their life cycle or their offering, that don't make sense for those reviews. Yet the reviews are, you're told, hey, just apply. And I think that there should be more clear guidelines for retailers. Like I think Jimbo's is an all organic guardrail that you have there, right?
There are all organic in bulk foods and all organic in produce. In grocery center store, there's ingredients, no-nos, always preferential to organic, but not required. However, even if you met the standards, if you were in a category that there was a lot of organic alternatives available, organics always trumped everything else. So meaning it could still meet the ingredient standards, but long story short, Jimbo himself ultimately says yes to everything. So I could think the product was great. I'm following my parameters, like it meets the guardrails, everything checks the box, but if Jimbo, for whatever reason, he trumped, right? And so I think that was a challenge for me to get used to that mindset, because I'm like, well, I already checked all these boxes and it's good, but the organic coming to the forefront, always was there. So I had to change the way I thought a little bit.
Yeah, I like certain, and I don't mean to range me too hard, but one of the things that they do is they have like pre-qualifiers for a buyer meeting. And that's how I landed at HEB most recently. I submitted my name. Hopefully something comes back. If something does come back, I have to pay X amount of dollars for that meeting, and I have to fly and put myself up wherever that is. I love that kind of thing because it's similar to getting when somebody introduces you to somebody without double opt-in. It's like an awkward, like, why am I here? Why did I get this email? When there's a double opt-in, it feels like there's actually a shot. And I think it would save a lot of buyers time if they just said, check off these boxes. If you check off all these boxes, apply. But I think a lot of them are just like, just apply. And they try to do the politically correct thing where it's like, even though you didn't get in, hit us up in 6 months. And it's just the same rules and guardrails. And I think it's a waste of time. I think there can be a cleaner clearer approach to it that would save both brands and buyers time. Because the last thing I want to do is waste somebody's time where they have to put on a nice face and say, I'm very sorry, hit us back up in 6 months when things change.
Right.
That's my just perspective on it.
No, I love that perspective. And I think, and if you could establish those parameters at every retailer, and to some extent, I'd like to think your stronger category managers might do that. But when you're talking about a couple hundred stores and at the end of the day, there's always going to be a couple seats higher than you. And you can make decisions that are best for the category in your mind and or running your category the way you are. But, I go back to that example of, well, I saw this over here. Why don't we have this? And it's like, well, here's my data. Here's why. Okay, but I want, it's like, okay, all bets are off. Let's go. Let's bring it in. But I like what you're going after with those boxes. And I think if you look at Jimbo's has come a long way since I've left even, and there's a pretty extensive, we were working on it before I left, but it's in place now on their website, that it's a pretty extensive checkbox that you have to go through this whole process before you can actually apply. And I think to what you're saying, it stops you from wasting time, and ultimately would stop the buyer from wasting time, right? It's like, it's a give and take. It's like, geez, I didn't know I have sucralose. It's not going to work. Or I have this. It's not going to work. Things like that would be nice to know. I just don't think that there are that many retailers that have that clear cut parameters and guardrails, if you will. I think it's a little bit more loosey goosey.
I think it'd be helpful for all. And I'm thinking less of a brand founder on this perspective, more of if I was a category manager, I would have type it into AI. Here's what's coming in to on my shelves that I'm managing, and it has to follow these rules. Turn this into a jot form or a whatever form that people can, self kick themselves out of my process to save me time, so I can then give the actual valuable feedback to those who came very close that I didn't quite want to bring on just yet.
Some vetting of sorts. Like I love that. I love that. I think you could probably bottle that and sell it, or package that and sell it if you can figure out how to make it work. It's just, being able to fine tune it for every different nuance that's out there.
There's got to be something. I bet after this one, somebody will come up with that. Like, there's a really cool guy that has a digital sell sheet platform. Maybe he hears this and builds in his vetting process for category reviews. Let's jump over to Jimbo's and then quickly to the fresh market. I have some very specific questions after we cover your entire history that I want to get into.
Okay. Yeah. So Jimbo's, I was at Rouses, living the dream, love the people there, love them to this day. In fact, we're going back in November to visit the area and try to get there at least once a year. But in early 2020, something happened that I think you probably know about, a little thing called the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Coincidentally, that daughter I referred to that it was finishing college had relocated to San Diego. My wife and I are, empty nesters in Louisiana, living our best lives. And, but mom, my wife tells me that, we need to go visit our daughter in California. I said, well, there's a pandemic, blah, blah, blah. She said, we're going. Okay. Yes, ma'am. And I think I have the receipts to back this up, or the email trail to back this up. I'm pretty sure I do. But literally within 24 hours of us booking those tickets to go visit our daughter, a recruiter contacted me about the opportunity for Jimbo's in San Diego. Yeah. And so it's kind of like divine intervention, call it what you want, right? It was just kind of like this, all these things are going on, right? We're at a different phase in our life where, we're empty nesters. We got the young baby out here on our own and the pandemic, and we're in a new area that we've only been just all this stuff is going on. And I always tell people that's, whether I thought with my head versus my heart, or vice versa, the heart versus the head. It was just like this divine intervention, and went out, interviewed, was offered the job, and ultimately took it. And, again, there's a consistent pattern here, right? I love Jimbo himself, who probably give me a hard time if he hears this, because he always does. Justin, who I think now is the president, CEO there running the company. Nothing, the team there, Billy, Jason, Colin, all the people, the relationships there are fantastic. Have the utmost respect for them. And it was a great ride. And for me, it was very integral in becoming who I am today, and that moving at the time that I did. So I got there in June of 2020, and pandemic was there, all these restrictions in place. So in-person meetings were the thing. I had moved in the course of, call it 3 years, I had moved from Ohio to Louisiana to California. So any connections I had were primarily on the Ohio side, because I spent 20 years at Buehler's, but also on the conventional side. And here I am on the opposite end of the country in a pandemic phase in natural organic grocery. And it was like, so I had to figure out how I was going to build relationships and figure out this new business. And so I took to LinkedIn and started doing a lot more on LinkedIn. Ultimately, around that time, started Friday Vibes, eventually CPG Vibes, and just really started doing things a lot that way, networking that way, because in-persons weren't a thing. Yeah, that was that.
Epic. Yeah, I always see that on Fridays. You guys are doing a great job over there with CPG Vibes. I was wondering about when I looked at your background, I was like, I wonder if he moved like every single time, or maybe he had some sort of remote thing going on, but you moved.
No. So Ohio to Louisiana, I worked at Buehler's. I want to say my last day was, I think it was Friday, and I left around. I mean, I just basically took my computer in and shut, and left and drove home. And it might have been Thursday, but either way. And I was starting work in Louisiana Monday, and a snowstorm came in Ohio, and so I had to leave earlier than I expected. So literally packed up what I needed to live in my car. My wife and I had flown down like a week earlier and locked down apartment to go. Packed up my car Saturday morning, left first thing in the morning, and arrived there, I don't know, early Sunday morning, whatever time it was, and started work on Monday. And then almost the same story when we moved from Louisiana to California. This time, I'd already locked down housing from the visit that I had done previously. So that was done. My sister-in-law was in visiting from Ohio. So my sister-in-law, my wife, and I drove from Louisiana to California across with most of our belongings in the car, the rest of them locked up in a storage container in Louisiana. And ultimately took a month to get those. That's another story. And drove across the country to California. And then California to North Carolina, which I know we're going to get to, that was a little bit more, Fresh Market's a little bit bigger organization. Moving process was a little bit more simple, but no, we moved every time. So between 2019 and February, March of 22, right? We'd moved 3 times.
And where
Crazy.
are you at currently?
I'm in North Carolina, close to Greensboro. Yep.
Very cool. Let's chat about that and round out your past 4 retailers that you worked at before Vdriven. And then we're going to jump into a founder's, pipe dream of asking a former buyer and category manager and VP of grocery and center store a bunch of questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'll try and go quick. So Jimbo's, everything is going great. Loved it. But I have this thing that I do, I haven't touched on, but it's a consistent thing, is like typically with myself, I do self-evaluations. They're more mental than, they're not necessarily formal. I don't have a template or anything. It's just more like, okay, where are you? Do you like where you are? Where are you going? Do you like that path? And so on. So I typically do that about every 2 years. It was coming up pretty quick on 2 years at Jimbo's. More importantly, it was coming up on our condo lease in Carlsbad, which is where we lived. Our condo was west of the 5. Absolutely loved it. But my wife and I, again, were empty nesters, living in California, Southern California at that, renting at this point in our lives. It was just like, okay, what are we doing here? Had we done it 30 years earlier, it might have made sense. But it was like, the average home, I think, in that area at that time, going back several years ago, was, I think, $750,000, $800,000. It's like, do I need that at this point in my life? No. And so I started entertaining, or just kind of casually looking, wasn't aggressively looking, just casually, was recruited by someone that recruited for the Fresh Market. And here I am.
That is one hell of a journey from 2019 to you left the Fresh Market. I honestly,
just last year,
the most I think I've moved is probably 15 miles at any given time.
Across the country and back in the span of 6 years. Yeah. 5 years, whatever it was. Yeah.
Crazy. So we've got the background now, and I want to dive into, you mentioned 3 reasons for brands getting authorizations. It's executive mandate. You mentioned price parity, and you mentioned first to market. I have a couple experiences where 2 cool ones. I'm just going to frame this question. There is a buyer in California who said, I don't like your product, but I don't think I'm your customer. I'm bringing it on. Mm-hmm. And then there's another buyer that said, there's another buyer that said, let me give you 3 examples. I like your product. I'm bringing it on. And there's another one that said, I love your product, and I think the category needs this, and we're going to help you build your brand. Mm-hmm. And how much does buyer preference, because taste can be a totally subjective thing. I've had literally people say, like, I hate your product. Mm-hmm. And that's all good. But how much does that buyer's perspective or taste really impact the direction of a category? Because we've seen a lot of outliers happen.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends on the individual and how they run their categories. The example I would give you is at the Fresh Market. They do, at least, and again, things could have changed in the year and a half I've been gone, but they would do extensive tastings. Like if you had category reviews, typically the category manager and their assistant would set up one of the conference rooms with, they did some preliminary vetting themselves, just not a good fit, didn't make sense, whatever. But then they would put like around a table with all these different samples for you to go through, taste, give feedback. And they probably have anywhere from 10 to 15 people from the merchandising department, various, come in and take one of these sheets and say, yes, liked it, no, didn't like, etc. And I thought that kind of goes back to what you said with, I don't like your product, but I'm not your customer. So it kind of weeds that part of it out, right? So if I taste it, I don't like something, I'm probably going to get a second opinion, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's just absolutely putrid. Like, for example, I'm not a huge tofu person or plant-based meat person. I'm weird with textures. So I would not objectively be able to taste something and say, yes, this is good. This tastes good compared to this. So, but I would find someone that is right to get that feedback. If I wasn't looking at just data, or if I wasn't, trending in the market, this brand's up double digits, I don't have it on the shelf. Geez, makes sense, right? But if it comes down to a taste or opinion, I'm going to solicit someone. If I'm not that customer, or if I know I hate, for example, olives, I'm not going to critique the taste of olives. I'm going to look at data, but that's it. And so I don't know. That's kind of way. But then at Jimbo's, the example you gave with regards to helping build brands and things like that, I felt at any point in my career that was the most closest I had to being empowered to do things like that, because even with the strict standards and things like that, we had the store size, the layout size, the shelf space to take chances, and it was only 4 stores, so it wasn't like you were making multi-million-dollar decisions on one item in a category like you were at for 170, 200 stores in 200 states, right? You're 22 states. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of retailers could benefit from operating like a brand. And what I mean by that is a brand, like the lifeblood of a brand is how many emails, phone numbers, social followers you have to build an army to drive them into store to buy. So if you don't get sold in the store, you're not going to stay on shelf. And I feel as though maybe if some buyers had surveys or some sort of, hey, send extra samples because we have these 100 top customers and our vegan customers who taste all of our products, and if it gets X%, pass rate, then you're on board as well. And that happens to be 2% of the total vote or whatever. I'm making numbers up, but I think that using the actual customers in the process could be a cool thing. And maybe I'm saying something where I have no fucking clue what I'm talking about and how difficult that is. But I feel like every retailer has a loyalty program. And I don't know how hard it would be to segment a loyalty program for, hey, why are you joining? Are you here for our vegan stuff, our low carb stuff? Do you want traditional things? And if you segmented people via email or SMS that way and said, hey, we have these many brands, show up to this showing for a, what are those things called? Focus group.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like spending 500 to $1,000 on a good amount of panels of actual customers can give you the insight that's very, very objective. These customers actually prefer this over this. I think that'd be helpful.
So loyalty programs are interesting. And we had 96% penetration with loyalty in Ohio, but that's primarily because we required you to have a card in order to get sale prices, right? Yeah. Which forces you to have that card. And then you get all that data, and data is great if you use it, right? And so we had various times when we were really, really deep in data, and other times when either there was a vacancy or just wasn't as focused. But you're exactly right. I mean, the cross promotional basket, the building the basket. Hey, if this person's buying steaks, odds are they have this and this in their basket, so let's give them a coupon for this, right? And vice versa. Hey, if you buy this steak sauce, we'll save you a couple dollars a pound on this, right? And so that's something. And then the fresh market, was doing, and again, things could have changed in the year and a half I've been gone, but they were doing things on their loyalty program with clubs, right? So if you were in the organic produce club, you buy X amount of organic produce, you get this. And so they were trying to do more of what I think what you're talking about, like with that basket building or just general, what appeals to you as a shopper. If you're buying this, can I get you to buy that? Or if you're a regular customer constantly buying this, let's make it rewarding for you to continue to do that here. And so I think, and you mentioned AI, and I'm an AI nerd. I think when you start thinking about the potential, when you take AI, when you take loyalty, when you take data and start, wrapping them up and packaging them, the opportunities are endless. It's just a matter of investing in the time and resources to get it done, which is the biggest challenge, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in blind taste tests amongst true customers. And I think most loyalty programs already exist for retailers, and segmenting for each category manager, like grocery or beverage or whatever. Like for me, I was just talking about functional beverage. If I can be blind taste tested amongst the crowd, like literally no one knows what the brand is, just what tastes best. I would bet on Perfy every day of the week, and that would remove all subjectivity.
Right.
The second thing I would say is I think that if you segmented loyalty programs, in this case, again, functional beverage, and you literally sent a survey to your loyalty people, like people that shop, 5 or more units of functional beverages a week, whatever that is, which of these beverages would you pull off the shelf? I think there's so many cool ways that we can integrate like a very proactive category review. Like, because Perfy's among a ton of functional beverages. We look a certain way, other beverages look a certain way. But getting that pre-data, I'll just make that up, I think could be helpful in making a decision and bringing on brands that grows a category.
Right. Yeah, and I think I agree with everything you said. I think the other thing that I always try to do myself, as well as coach my teams wherever I've been, is you can't just simply look at units per store per week. You can't. Units per store per week is great. It's a nice metric, but it's not the be all end all.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the space that I'm in now, in natural organic specialty retail, more often than not, the products we're talking are higher end, higher dollar, and I always say, you pay the bills with dollars. And so great, I'm leading the category in units per store per week, but what's the dollar contribution in sales and profit? And if your product is a loss leader and I have to compress margin in order to be competitive in the market, I can take your product. I'm pointing to you, but just for conversation's sake, I can take your product, which I'm not compressing margin, which maybe my units per store per week aren't, but dollar contribution, profit contribution are higher, and that's the data story that I have to be able to tell and have to be able to evaluate. And I think there's a lost art there, because I often hear that units per store, units per store, units per store. It's like, okay, but does it pay the bills? And I don't know. I mean, it's you can obsess over units per store, but to me, there's a balance, right? You've got to have those units, but you also have the dollars, right?
Yeah, I think one other thing is, what were the promotions that drove those units per store per week? Mm-hmm. And not many people talk about that flip side. There's no tie back to that. I always talk about tie back. There's I go, we'll do the talking rain thing with sparkling ice. Let's do 10 for 10 and see what happens. Of course, the units per store per week are going to be a rocket high.
You can give anything away. You can give anything away, and that's the key. And so in the delicate balance with promotions, right? If you're a brand and you're promoting too often, I've gone on record countless times saying, I want to establish your everyday price point, because that's what I want people to buy it at. If I could sell 2x, 3x on promotion, wonderful, but I need them to want to and realize the quality of the product and the perceived value at regular retail. We do 4 weeks promotions in natural, so 16, so 30 plus weeks a year. I need them to buy at this price, not this price. Yeah, we can give anything away.
Yeah. What are some of the things that are exciting you in CPG right now, specifically like brands or products or categories or types of products?
That's it. I have to be careful here, because I don't want to leave out any brands. I want to talk about some people that we work with, but at the same time, it's like, oh, I didn't talk about this one. I think for me, what I get excited about is just, you've already mentioned the word innovation, but I think it's seeing the hustle, right? And that's what gets me excited. I talk about people like, something I see, and I don't know if you know this person, but Lex with Lexington Bakes. I mean, the guy's a hustler, and he's pouring his heart out, and stories like that in Sydney with French Squirrel, and just sharing, just really, and this is me putting my Jimbo's hat on, the smaller brand, and so I'm not thinking about, does this product fit in Buehler's or conventional retail. I'm just talking, just in general, what I like, the stories, the passion, the drive, the hustle, the ups, the downs. A brand that we do work with, and we do work with Sydney, full disclosure, but Whole Harmony, Stacy and Dave, and they are in this month's smoothie, Heidi Kluminator smoothie at Erewhon, but I mean, the funny, we talk about the cycle of the degrees of separation in CPG. I always say it's maybe 1 or 2 versus 6 with Kevin Bacon. I originally talked to them after I'd left the fresh market, and I said, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was doing this work with Wade thing, and I was just figuring out what I wanted to do next. And they reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I talked to them. Great people and interesting what they're working on. I said, but it's just too much for me. I can't do it. And I referred them to Luke. And here we are, a year later, and we're working together on different aspects. So that relationship thing comes back. But what they're doing with these chakras and the vibrations in there, and the Erewhon smoothie, and just there's a lot that excites me. I mean, my wife and I are daily shopping, and we're pretty regular. We don't. It's like she eats the same thing virtually every day of the week, which I don't totally get, but there's a lot of consistency there. But then I like going in and seeing new products. Like I don't care if I go to Harris Teeter here, the Lowe's that's beside me, Sprouts, Whole Foods. Oh, I haven't seen that. We were at a co-op in Richmond a couple weeks ago, and I'm nerding out picking stuff up. I can't tell you specific brands, but it's like, if I haven't seen it and it sounds like something I want, that's what excites me, along with that whole founder hustle, passion, drive, and authenticity. And I think that's the other part that really gets me, is if I can pick up on the authenticity of whether it's the founder or the product, it's like, okay, I'm invested. Tell me, and I just sink my teeth in.
I love that. Yeah, Lex is he's making some cool baked goods over there. For me, I think I've got a quick story on hustle. Mm-hmm. Actually, before that, I'm going to go with some things that I see in the market that I think are really, really cool. Okay. I think the tallow fries from Jesse and Ben's are going to be... I haven't got
to try those yet, but I got to tell you, I made tallow potatoes this weekend, and I'm a sucker for tallow chips, so I'm in. I haven't tried those yet, but I think they just got distribution. I actually looked online at, I think, my Sprouts ingredient. I'd been checking when they said they got distribution at Sprouts. I've been checking. Nope. And they're there now, so I'm in.
Those were good. They're either using tallow or avocado oil, and it's basically just potato and whatever the oil they're frying or baking in. I think that's one of the big ones. I really like this brand called Sour Milk. They were previously called Benny. And this girl in New York is basically treating it like drug deals. No joke. That's how she describes it. She makes it, I think, in some offsite thing. I think in a bakery, she's making her yogurts. She's taking orders on her website and meeting at random side corners and delivering in brown bags.
Wow.
And she sold 4,000 units, I think, in the past few weeks, which is insane. It's probably a $5 or $8 tub of yogurt. But that hustle, I mean, that's meant for social, telling that story about how you can have so much fun on that with people kind of spying on you doing a drug deal, handing off the bag of yogurt.
I love that. I'm going to have to check it out. I haven't seen that one yet.
She's awesome. I think she's going to do very, very well. I like the One Trick Pony brand. I have no affiliation with any of these brands, by the way. One Trick Pony did a peanut butter jar where it's kind of flipped over. When you buy a normal peanut butter jar, the oil's on top and it's all nasty and you got to do it. She did a thing where it's flipped like this, and you can store it that way, or you can store it like this, and there's no shoulders on it. So the mixing of it is just so smooth. I think that's pretty crazy and a really cool innovation in terms of the actual vessel that the peanut butter's in. I haven't seen that before. That's really cool branding. Those are 3 that I'm keeping my eyes out right now, as a scout of what are the next big brands.
So for you, I'm flipping this. You're interviewing me, but I'm talking. This conversation is not an interview. So for you, with your marketing hat on, which obviously you have this, this great. You're a founder, but you're also a marketer. So what appeals to you in those brands? Is it the marketing? What they're doing with some of the marketing components is a little bit of everything. How does that factor in? Because I think of brands like your Liquid Death and the one. What's the cereal brand in the UK? That one I fall for. Is it
Surreal?
I love what they do from a marketing standpoint. I just get sucked into that. I haven't tried the product, but for you, is it the same way? Or
I think I'll go with each one to begin with. Sour Milk excites me because that founder seems like she knows what she's doing in terms of storytelling and product. She quickly pivoted from Benny to Sour Milk. I thought that was pretty wise. People usually hold on to that change for years and years. That's why I like them. I haven't tried it. I'm not in New York. I can't do a drug deal with her. I don't think yogurt would be great for a cross-state or interstate delivery.
Right.
I love Jesse and Ben's simply because the product tastes good. The branding, I don't really have any. I'm indifferent to the branding. I'm very, very partial to the execution of the product. Very simple: potatoes and tallow, or potatoes and avocado oil. That's why I like them. I think that brand's going to crush it, especially with the Maha movement. And last December, I did my 2025 predictions. And I didn't initially launch with it because I forgot. I space brained, but I came back within a week and edited it. I said, and I forgot tallow. And I think tallow things are going to be huge. I think they already are huge because of the Maha movement. And like whatever happened to ghee, I think tallow has really replaced ghee, and I feel bad for Fifth and Heart or whatever other brands have that, because ghee was huge and it had a different taste and a different scent. But I think butter and tallow are really that new wave. And the last one, it was Jesse Ben Sour Milk, One Trick Pony. I think that anything that disrupts a customer's perception of a product, like if you go to Trader Joe's, you're going to see the standard like 16-ounce jar. It's going to be oily on the side. Like when you take it off, it's going to have that really terrible pull that you have to pull. I think anything that disrupts that monotony is going to win for the most part. With them, it's a very functional point of difference, that not having shoulders so you can stir easier and not get messy. It's flipped over so you kind of flip it back and now it's like good to go. That's particularly why I like them. The other note is they do have other flavors that seem as though they do come in the old style of peanut butter packaging, but they have inclusions in them. And I think that excites me about peanut butter too, because with nut butters, you usually have like crunchy or smooth. They're putting things that aren't even freaking, like I think they put like vanilla wafer balls or something in their latest LTO or something. So that's exciting, because when we put inclusions in Quest bars back in the day, that changed the game for them, especially in chocolate chip cookie dough. Right. So inclusions in nut butters, it sounds decadent, it sounds flavorful. The colors are really, really vibrant. You put that on a shelf next to other nut butters and it's completely night and day. Those are my 3 reasons.
Nice. I like it.
Okay. You mentioned innovation briefly, because I mentioned innovation briefly, but this is a question that I have for you. Innovation sets are right now a huge tool for retailers. They are ways that they're increasing their bottom line. They're making their customers happy because they're bringing on different things for them to kind of find, similar to like the Trader Joe's effect of being a treasure hunt. How does it look like for a brand to win and evolve into mainline? And how has this impacted retailer from a tactical level?
Well, let's start with the first part of that. So success. So I think ultimately success means graduating. I use that term. I don't know if it's the right one from this in the main line. And I think the key there is identifying in advance what that success, how that retailer is defining that success. In other words, is it a units per store per week metric? And is that relative to the existing category, the existing main line? And ideally, I know that from a brand perspective prior to going live on that innovation set, right? And we're being agnostic to retailers here, just speaking in general. If the principles, at least the way I understand it from innovation set, is it's a test, right? Because it's not permanent, so you have a defined period of time to succeed or for the program. So you have those are your guardrails to start with. Here's the starting point. Here's the ending point. Is success selling out? Is that selling out in the first month? Is it units per store per week? Is it dollar contribution? What are those metrics? And I think if I'm doing it right as a category manager, I'm sharing that with the brands that I'm bringing into this, saying, here's what, because then I'm being transparent and I'm saying, okay, Vasa, I need to sell 3 units per SKU per store on average over the course of this program to even be considered over here. Because if it's 2 and the flat line or the baseline over here is 3, 4, it doesn't cut the mustard. And so I think, to me, that would be successful. And I think, well, let's pause there and talk about that a little bit, see if you have questions relative to that. Because I think, I don't know, did I dance around that? Do I need to get more in the weeds?
No. My perspective on that is, and in no way am I like trying to get you caught up in any questions at all. It's more like I'm thinking through your answer. So if innovation sets are giving people, like customers, the opportunity to find new things and have that, hey, this is a source of innovation for me as a buyer or a shopper to buy new things that are exciting to me. Mm-hmm. Cool. But can that island or that footprint that retailers are using, again, we're being retailer agnostic here.
Yep.
Can that be a better use with more established players? And this is like the antithesis of what's good for me right now.
It's a valid question. I think experience has told me that I would say yes, it could be used differently, and it could be another mass display. It could be that it's paid display, so I'm going to get X amount of dollars to put a 2 pallet drop, 3 pallet, whatever that space is. And I absolutely could sell that. But I think that you brought up Trader Joe's and you brought up the treasure hunt aspect. I think that's part of what the appeal here is that it's something different, like theoretically every time you come in. So this goes back to that metric with units per store per week, dollars, take dollars, blah, blah, blah. I don't think the dollars if the metric is dollars per square foot, I don't think that space is maximizing that metric. But
Mm.
if it's drawing foot traffic, if it's bringing people in for that treasure hunt, and I'm going to they're not just picking up stuff off the innovation set, so they're going to pick up different things. Maybe that's the hook, right? So if it's just another, I'm just going to make something outside of the natural channel. So if it's just another pallet drop of Doritos or Coke or Pepsi, okay, great. Have I really increased basket? But if I've trained someone to pick up a tallow or a tallow chip or something like that, then did I build my basket? Did I get them to come back and see what's here next week? I think that's to me what excites me about from an operational standpoint or from an operator's standpoint. That's what I like about the innovation set. The whole mindset behind it is you're breaking away from the norm. That the pallet drops of stuff we see every day.
I got 2 questions from that.
Okay.
What's more accretive to the bottom line? A brand's trade spend with the organization or the retailer, or the turns, like fast turns?
I default to dollars paid to bills. And so I'll go back to Rouses because I think they did one of the best jobs with vendor scorecards of anywhere I've been. And they called them just that. It was vendor scorecard. So I could see your units, I could see your dollars, I could see your margin contribution, I could see your spend, because they were self-managed funds. So everything they did, there was an accrual basis. They didn't do off invoice promotions through their distributors. It was, okay, I'm going to pay X% on every case that you buy. And I manage, as a category manager, I manage those funds. But they packaged all that together. So when I was having vendor meetings, I'd sit down with you and say, okay, Vasa, let's look at your business. And we could see all those things. So trade promotions is absolutely part of it, but so is units, and so is dollars, and so is margin. And so is, I mean, you're scoring it against yourself year over year, the category year over year, you relative to the category, and then to some extent you to your competition. So if I'm doing my job, first and foremost, I want my category to be healthy. And then in a perfect world, I want all my brands within that category to be healthy. And if someone's not pulling their weight in any of those different metrics that I said, that's when I'm looking to say, okay, if my partnership with you is good, the trade spend's good, you're a good partner. Hey, Vasa, this SKU isn't cutting the mustard. What can we do about it? Do you have something to swap it with or something like that? If your brand isn't doing it, if your trade spend's there, but it's just not performing, I'm probably going to be looking to take chances on something else.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Actually, I love those relationships. We just had one today. A buyer said, hey, we need to do a little something here, get a demo going or do this X, Y, and Z. And we're going to do it. We want to be good partners. We love the open line of communications. I think that's the best way to go because none of us can read each other's minds on certain things. And I actually have switched out flavors before for better selling flavors, things like that. Okay, back to innovation.
Yep.
One last question. I got to try to find it because I didn't want to write it down and not look at you. What was it?
You said operations or something, but
yes, I think it's along the lines of, in this one, you can totally take plead the fifth or take like a very PC approach.
Yep.
When it comes to innovation sets, as a beverage founder, my knowledge is that if you're not in certain DCs, depending on the route to market, you have to pay for those DCs to be unlocked to service that innovation. Is there any risk in doing that, or can you mitigate that risk by trying to unlock more doors while you're in an innovation period?
My understanding with the innovation set is you bypass some of those DC openings to some extent. You don't have all of the fees that associated with if you get mainline placement somewhere tomorrow, there's that cost. Right? I'm going to open this DC. There's ways to your point, to mitigate some of those by going into a certain setup process that you're not necessarily opening that DC. You're just, it's almost like a build to, ship to, or a cross dock type scenario where, okay, you're not getting a warehouse. You're getting, you're not getting slotted. You're just coming in and going out and we're done. We're still going to have the conversation about opening the DC if and when you go to the main line. But today, now, that's not the case. So that's the way I think I've seen it done. And as far as that goes, but I would say that if you can in parallel run to support that DC, maybe there is an opportunity there to say, okay, I know I've got this innovation launch coming in here. What makes sense for me to run parallel? Does it make sense for me to try and attack that area to support the DC, thinking forward, thinking down the road, but then also you can look at it as also supporting innovation as far as your performance there, because then potentially you've clustered stores together where you can do more with the marketing aspect, you can do more with demoing and blitzing, that if you just are in that one location, as long as your agreement with that innovation piece doesn't conflict with doing that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it sounds like the move is to parallel path that innovation cross-docking with some biz dev. So you might potentially unlock that DC officially, but you have to do it in a way where the planned demand comes in and you're not cannibalizing the inventory that was meant for the inventory set.
It's a dance, but I think it can be done. Yeah.
Very interesting. Last question to send us off.
Okay.
What happens when an innovation set is intended to bring new customers because of new products? What happens if the product itself isn't necessarily innovative?
I'm going to put my category manager hat on. So I have to decide, to me, what's innovative. Is it a flavor? Is it an attribute? Is it a category? Is it, what is it? What is it? I have to define that. And I don't know that there's a definitive answer there, right?
Great.
But I think my job, if I'm doing that, is to push that envelope and understand what that is, and not just to say, okay, well, it's I don't know, making something up, low fat ranch dressing, yay! Is that innovation? No, I mean, so but the other thing is though is I'm going to talk out both sides of my mouth, because maybe it is and that's a bad example, but maybe it is if it hasn't existed before by that brand. Maybe, I'm making something up, Cheerios lemon blueberry Cheerios, something like that, right? I mean, if I can get an exclusive on that and you can't get it across the street, you could argue that's seasonal innovation of some kind. So yeah. I think we overuse the word, but I think it's a matter of there's too much gray there on what it actually means. But I think there's an answer there. It's just finding what that answer is.
I think you nailed it, dude. That's the rub, is if it just wasn't called an innovation set, if it was called like
and I don't think everybody is. Some people knew it, to mean something. Yeah. But everybody's going to have their own, cliche name that they come up with to try and get it. But let's talk about it. It's new, right? That's what it is. So
new. That's what it should be, like the new item set. And innovation can be so convoluted, because you see, like you mentioned yourself, if Cheerios came out with lemon blueberry, yeah, but they've been around since Nom. So some people might say, is this really innovative?
Right.
I think it is, because you've never seen that from them, but it can be argued both ways.
Right.
That's something that I'll be noodling on after we get off.
Love it.
By the way, thanks so much for joining, Wade. It really meant a lot. And if you can't tell, I was like zoned in, like listening, trying to learn as much as possible from you.
Appreciate it, Vasa. Thank you.
Anytime.
Take care.